can probably say I can probably say
difficult conversations. Why do you think people avoid difficult conversations at work?
Well, I think there's a number of reasons. I think one of the first is that people don't necessarily know how to have them. So they don't have a process, and without a process, they feel, well, I don't know where to start.
Yeah.
I think there is definitely a fear of upsetting people or causing a reaction that is either upset or anger or creates a bigger problem. And therefore, it's easier to perhaps not have the conversation and let it sort of slide.
Totally.
And also, in certain areas, topics become, well, we can't talk about that
Within the workplace.
Within the workplace. So this, they can be broader topics that maybe are more involved outside in the wider world, but also just within the workplace about what's going on at any particular time.
Yeah.
So I think that tends to be the sort of two main reasons that people have. They don't have a process to do it, and as we link to that, they're not confident in doing it, and then they don't want to upset somebody or cause a problem in relationship.
It's so simple and yet so complicated, because usually when we don't know how to do something, we have a tendency to avoid it, right? It's even if it's having difficult conversations or doing anything else. If we don't have a process, don't have a system, we're going to avoid it. And it applies into everything, personal lives, professional lives, but we do see it in the workplaces quite often. And like in personal life, avoiding difficult conversations can cause a lot of issues. In the workplaces, it can cause so many different issues that a lot of companies probably don't even realize the level of those issues. And it goes both ways, to the managers that would avoid having those conversations, but also employees, people who just started working, have been working at company for a while. They don't know how to approach. They don't feel comfortable, don't feel confident. And I think probably this is a kind of pain point, and this is why you and Ken came up with this wonderful book that you wrote with this very vivid title. I need to talk to you. Could you tell more about
exactly, and the art of navigating difficult workplace conversations. And I think that one of the things you say really early on in the book is, and in our workshops, is I need to fucking talk to you is not the way that you should start any conversation, but it can be the way that managers feel, because the pressure just builds and builds and builds. And if you think about what I said earlier, I don't know what to say. I don't feel confident to say. The problem doesn't solve itself. So it just gets bigger, and therefore people end up just losing it, metaphorically speaking, a lot of times. So a lot of the work in the book is about how to give people a structure that's easy for them to remember and easy to apply, so that they can do that. Because as a manager, if you just think of it from a manager perspective for a moment, if you don't have those conversations, it doesn't do your reputation as the manager any good, because people just look at you, or the manager or leader, and say, well, this person's weak, they're ineffective, they don't tackle problems. The team, it doesn't help them, because they look and say, well, if I let Svetlana do this, then why am I not allowed to do it? She gets away with it, why can't I? If somebody's like persistently late or something, or continually underperforms, if you don't tackle that, everybody knows about it, they just don't talk about it.
Yeah.
And then the key thing, I think, which a lot of people forget, is you're not actually doing the person any favors. If we're working there and I work with you, or I work for you in this situation, and I'm not performing well, and you don't say anything, and our co-workers talk about me, and you talk about me with them over over coffee, but you'll never talk to me. So I can't do anything about it, because I don't know that I need to improve, or if I do, I don't know how to improve, and we just don't discuss it. So ultimately, you probably try and move me somewhere else in the organization at a convenient point, or there's layoffs, and then you just lay me off because it's easier. We never had that conversation,
and it becomes this vicious kind of cycle of misunderstandings, assumptions, and people just go so deep into it that they forget why it started in the first place, right? Why they don't really know how to work together, or why something isn't necessarily effective in the company. But I can completely understand that Some people might just, based on their personality, maybe cultural background, how they brought up, they are more comfortable with having those difficult conversations. Other people, they would have more of those people-pleasing tendencies. So they would try and avoid those difficult conversations, or they would try to find some other ways to solve the problems. Do you think that being able to have difficult conversation is a skill that everybody can learn how to do it, or this is something that you kind of have to have it in you, in your personality, to be able to navigate it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like a lot of things in the leadership space. Some people are more naturally inclined to that. It comes easier to them.
Yeah.
Other people have to work at it. But in terms of, can anybody do it? Yes. I mean, they just need to read the book and do the workshop. No, but seriously, yeah, anybody can do it if they're given the right support and development to do it. You just learn. And part of it is by practice. So one of the things that we do, as you know, on our workshops is we use professional improv artists.
Yeah.
So to practice having a conversation like we are now, rather than me just thinking through in my head what I would say, we'll have an actor sitting there playing the other party. So they're playing the member of staff that you need to have the conversation with, or the client you need to talk to, or whoever, or the co-worker, so whoever it might be. Then that gives people a chance to practice in real time, as close to reality as possible, without having, no one's going to go to the unions
and report you,
or no one's going to resign, or no one's going to come and put in a complaint, because you're able to practice. And then we use something called stop-start theatre, which means we can stop the action and say to people, okay, so what are you seeing? And then others in the group can share, hey, I really like the way that Svetlana's doing this. I really like the way she's doing that, but what about if you try this? And then you can try to take those suggestions on board and rewind it. And as an actor, they can just rewind the scene and then play it again as if nothing's happened. So you can try a couple of different approaches to see what works. You can't do that in real life, because once it's come
that's
out
what I was thinking about.
Oh dear,
you can't redo it.
I can look at the reaction on your face, and I'm like, oh shit, I shouldn't have said that. It's too late.
Yeah.
And that's often why people, well, what if I make a mistake? Whereas in that environment, because it's there in a safe environment, a learning environment, I can make that mistake. But I always say the worst thing that happens to somebody in one of those workshops is maybe their ego gets bruised temporarily. They just feel a bit awkward.
Yeah.
But then they can correct it. And we always make sure that people are able to correct it and get to a more successful resolution. But it's good to be able to try it yourself, and also to be able to watch other people, because you might say, well, your way of dealing with a situation may be completely different to mine.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that your way is necessarily, it's just different. So I might learn from you, you might learn from me, because we are putting, oh, that's really good. That phrase they use, that tone of voice. So watching other people do it as well as doing it yourself is a good environment. And, just giving people a format that they can use.
And that's such a unique format. First time when I heard about it, I thought, well, it's brilliant, because you can do a lot of things in theory. You can reflect, you can write down, you can practice with your peers, for example. But nothing can imitate the environment to the real life scenario as much as if you have something like that with a person that you've never met. And also the fact that this person actually is trained to maybe trigger you, or maybe to kind of take conversation in a certain way. So you say that this is definitely something that people can develop, people can work on. And if I am a natural people pleaser and I say I cannot have those difficult conversations, I don't know where to start, I freeze, with a little bit of a practice, I'm going to be able to do that.
Absolutely. And the way that we operate on the book is basically an explanation of how the workshop, it's all the exercises we do in the workshop.
Yeah.
It's written in a similar way with dialogue, so you can see the different characters operating. But that's like instead of giving people handouts, that's like the book of handouts. So those sort of things are really quite powerful for people to see.
It's so much fun. And I agree that probably it's better than nothing if I come to me and say, Russell, I need to have this difficult conversation. I have no idea where to start, so let's practice. Maybe it's going to help a little bit. But the moment you actually get into this mode with somebody that you don't know, it's like doing mock interviews. When I work with a lot of students, when we do mock interviews, especially with people they don't know, they would say, well, yes, there is no stakes. They're not getting or not getting the job. They know that it's a mock interview, but they came and they're nervous and they're trying to do their best. And then they come out of it and say, oh my goodness, it was such a great preparation and practice, because they felt the emotion. They felt how it feels to be anxious, how it feels to talk to the person in front of you that you don't know and share certain things that you're supposed to share when you want to get this job, and how you present yourself. So it's very much similar to how do you actually have those difficult conversations, when in this case, I think it's even more complicated because, as we said at the beginning, a lot of people would avoid having those conversations because emotions get involved, and some people can control them better than the others. And then, as you said, in the workplace, it goes into, what if I can or cannot say that? Should I say it? What if I say something that I'm not supposed to be saying? So there are so many fears around it that people like, okay, let's just avoid it. Let's not talk about it. But then we know when we avoid things that are burning, like it's gonna blow up.
Exactly. It's you're better dealing with a problem that's this big than when it's
Yes.
this big,
Yeah.
and it's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
In the same way as it would be in a personal relationship, it's the same way in a work relationship.
Yeah.
The issue's still there. It just gets worse.
Yeah.
It doesn't suddenly, hey, wake up and it's all been forgotten now. We don't talk about
Totally.
it anymore. And if it is, then if that is how you feel, then the point is, well, what were you worrying about in the first place? Why were you even considering it? It was obviously nothing. So get a grip and get into perspective. But I think back to what you were saying, making some notes before you have this conversation would be better than nothing. Like, the worst thing to do is basically just to go in there, blank sheet of paper,
See how
no
it goes.
real, let's just see how it goes, because the chances are it's going to blow up in your face. So making some notes and thinking it through is better than that. Then having a conversation with a peer that you trust, that you can have just run through some things is better than just doing notes. But doing the type of workshop where you can sit down there and practice with somebody who's professional and they've got no skin in the game. All they want to do is try and help you be better.
Yeah.
So you can do fantastically well, you could do horribly initially. It doesn't make any odds. By the end, you'll learn from it, and you'll be.
And I can totally relate. It's like the trainers in the gym. There would be somebody who is too kind with you and doesn't push you enough. Well, you're not going to get the results that you want. But if this is somebody who is tough, who would push you over your limits, you're going to get results way faster and better. And same idea in terms of when you practice and kind of develop this skill of being comfortable with uncomfortable. Based on your work with a lot of leaders, I know that you guys work with a lot of organizations and leaders from all the different walks of life and stages of career. What are the main issues they would come to you and say, this is the type of difficult conversations I want to have in my organization, but I don't know how to?
I think there's often that one about having just in terms of, there might be personal issues that the other person's going through, so they feel that they're sort of treading in a bit of a landmine. They don't want to trip over something because they. So particularly anything around mental health tends to be a concern.
Yeah.
That they don't, say the wrong thing,
ask the wrong things.
Or with people whose emotions tend to be quite emotional in the way they respond. Sometimes you realise that's a bit of a deflection tactic that people use. If you speak to me and I get angry or upset, that's probably going to make you feel a bit uncomfortable, and therefore the chances are the conversation may stop.
Yeah.
So we do some work on that. I think one of the other ones is, what about the people who they're not, let's say performance-wise or behaviour-wise, is not bad enough that you can get into the progressive discipline, but he's not good enough that you can say, well, they're good. They're not a great performer, but they're a good, solid performer, which most organisations need a large cohort of good performers.
Yeah.
You don't need everybody to be a top performer, but you need a whole good performer. Well, these are the people that sort of shade off on they sort of weave in and out of, sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not as good.
Yeah.
That tends to be a bit of a challenge for people because, do they pull the trigger on this with this person? Do they speak with them? They don't want to make it worse. That's often a challenging one where you're trying to, at what point should they be having that conversation? And then just sort of common one around people's people aren't meeting targets or getting people to understand that thing, the change management piece.
Yeah.
This was great. The last 10 years, it's been great that you've done this, but we now are in 2025, we're not in 2015. What flew then doesn't fly now. We need you to do things differently.
That makes sense.
And where people have been a good, solid employee, but perhaps times have moved on faster than they've moved on.
Yeah.
And therefore, how do we address that with people? Because then there's that piece, well, I don't really want to lose this person. They're a loyal member of staff, but they're not quite as effective as they were some time ago. So I think those, the change management piece, the performance that shades in and out of acceptable, and then anything that has to do where there's perceived mental health issues.
It makes a lot of sense.
Concerned about dealing with that. They don't want to fall foul of
and
legislation or HR.
HR totally. Very important topics, and I think there is no one company who would say, well, never have we ever dealt with something like that, right? So you talked about the leadership perspective. So all of those topics that leaders would need to kind of think, how do I have a conversation with my employee? How do I deliver this news about the change in the organization? When it comes to employees, what would you say from your experience are some of those topics that people just don't feel comfortable to talk about, and they don't at work, but then it just becomes a disadvantage for them?
So from an employee perspective,
yeah.
Well, I think again, there's always those interpersonal issues, that disagreement with other employees, which can tend to be one people not sure how to deal with. The other one, I think, if they're talking to their boss,
the authority level,
is sometimes a lot bit around expectations. So if people aren't clear, I mean, one example that comes to mind is so what the organization, the management would tend to do is say, well, I want you to make decisions.
Yeah.
But then if you made a decision that they didn't agree with, they then go, well, why did you make that decision? So it left people feeling uncertain as to how much have you delegated responsibility or not, and to what degree? So from just flipping back to a management perspective, one of the things I've always said to leaders is, okay, you need to be able to give people the parameters where they can make decisions. Is it like a postage stamp? Is it the size of a whiteboard? Or a piece of flip chart? What is it? How much latitude do they have? And then if you've given them that latitude, then let people make those decisions. And then you can review things later on as to whether they generally make good decisions or poor decisions. Yeah. If you're always saying, hey, Svetlana, you make the decision. And the minute you're like, well, what are you doing? What are you doing?
Or what did you do?
Why have you done that? And then people, well, I thought you said I could. Now you're saying I can't. And I think that there's a lot of that happens, particularly with less experienced leaders, which means that their staff then feel uncertain. And then people tend to go, well, you want me to be innovative, but every time I'm innovative, you say don't do that. So perhaps I won't. And then people retreat back into that sort of little bit of safetyism, but in terms of not from a health and safety perspective, but safetyism in terms of, well, I won't going to take a risk.
Yeah.
It's just not worth it. I just don't need that. I might as well just play it safe, just do what we've always done. And then I risk not getting criticized for doing it, and don't feel that they can go to their manager and say, actually, look, what do you want me to do here? And challenge upwards. So that upward management is difficult for people. Sometimes that's, it's an age difference. Yeah. Sometimes it can be based on, culturally, the organization doesn't tend to agree, approve of that.
Yeah.
Says it does, but doesn't in reality. Or just culturally, where people have, as we have a more diverse workforce, certain cultures, it's not seen as acceptable to challenge your manager, particularly if it's in public. So people are they're worried something's going to, well, you don't do that, And then so that can be difficult there, because perhaps you've got a manager who's expecting to, when you say, what do you think of this? They're expecting for people to come back with feedback, and everybody goes, well, what do you think? And they go, so that takes a bit of time to work through that. But so people know it's okay. I'm expecting you to challenge me. Nothing's going to I'm not going to fire you because you challenge me. So I think there's a little bit about permissions. There's a bit about role modeling the sort of behaviour that you want people to demonstrate. and then it's supporting people in the and some training in how to have that. How do you approach your boss? So you
Yeah.
can have like the workshops we do. You know tend to be companies coming for their leaders. You could equally do a set of workshops for their
For
employees.
absolutely.
Say,
I
well,
can
how
see
do
that.
you challenge upwards? I mean, we've done a couple at the CPHR conference, but how do you challenge upwards? How do you challenge your boss?
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
very, very popular because a lot of people are like, I'd love to know how to challenge my boss, particularly if they have managers that have some of those toxic traits.
Yeah.
You know, well, how do I manage that person? You know, that's an
And
interesting
sometimes it can be a really fine line. If we speak about managers with potential toxic traits, it could be this fine line between, is it a toxic trait and like almost bullying, or is it just like constructive feedback and direct tough management, right? Sometimes it's a little bit of a gray area in between the two. Yes, definitely there are cases when it is obvious, when it's kind of crossing the line. But sometimes it could be like, you make me feel uncomfortable, but is it because I'm just being such a person who doesn't want to have uncomfortable conversations, or you're pushing me too hard and you're being a little bit bully and having all of those toxic traits as a manager?
Yeah, and I think sometimes, you know, if we take the sort of person with some people just are not particularly good interacting with people
Yeah.
person, yeah. But sometimes it's also a combination of that, and also it's not just expectations aren't clear, and the conversation was
Yeah.
never had.
Yeah.
I mean, I can and I was only talking to somebody about this the other day. You know, I can think of an experience many years ago, so it shows how long that stuck with me. I went into a job. I'd worked there for 2 years. I'd had two different managers. Both managers had given me appraisals, which was a 5-box system, a 2 out of 5. So that was like very good. They said, oh, you're fitted for promotion to the next level. Everything's great. Nothing. I get a new manager. I was working for him for 3 months. I have a quarterly appraisal with him, and he says, you're not up to the job and you shouldn't be working here, and you're not fit. So, well, something's not right. Either the other two people were wrong or he was wrong. And I said to him, well, can you explain why? And his response to me was, I don't need to explain myself to you. I'm your boss. Now, that was always lasting with me. I mean, this must have been at least 25 years ago. I can remember that conversation.
Of course you do.
And I can remember that relationship never improved and it just got worse.
Yeah.
What was interesting is that many other people had worked for him and had similar type of experience, because what it was is he was a very good technician. He was he should never have been managing people. Problem solving, complex casework, this guy would be great.
Yeah.
Having to manage a team of people,
Yeah.
he couldn't, you know, find his butt cheeks with both hands. The guy was awful because he couldn't explain. He didn't pay clear expectations. He didn't like to be challenged. And then when people did, he would retreat back immediately into the, well, I'm your boss.
Yeah.
Which is never, if that's just your starting point, is never a good. I mean, there might be times when you have to say, look, ultimately, you know, I'm your manager. I'm asking you to do this. I need you to do it. But if that's your starting point all the time, you're not going to get somewhere. So, you know, if I'd known the things I know now when I had that, it would have been a lot easier. But it was one of the reasons why I then focused a lot then on leadership development, because one of the things I came out like, I do not want other people to be managed by he's not with us anymore, so he's talking about idiots like this. This guy and he should never have been in that role.
Yeah,
I mean, he was just totally unsuited to managing people because he couldn't manage to save his life, and it just created problems because what happened is good people left.
Totally.
Okay, I'll blame my own one. Good people like me left. Other people left as well. They just left because it was just like, hey, it's not worth working for this guy.
Yeah.
You know, he just one other example without sort of going off on too much of a tangent. He did a whole team of 10 people's appraisals and wrote the same comments in everybody's appraisal.
And people talk.
And they go, he wrote like 3 lines and it's the same for everybody.
Yeah.
And his argument was, well, you all do the same job.
Okay.
But you thought, look, I mean, now in the days of ChatGPT or something like that,
it's easier.
You could go in and say, you know, rephrase this slightly to at least give some effort.
Yeah.
But to him, that whole thing was a complete waste of time. I've told you my opinion of you. That's all you need to know. But of course, people say, well, you know, what do you think I'm good at? What do you think I can improve at? Well, you don't need to know that.
It's such a cool example. You know, I love that you're sharing that, because because there is this like quote going all over social media for a while. Um, be who you needed when you were younger, and probably this was one of those like pain points from your back when you started your kind of professional life, why you decided to write this book, and why you went into this field of leadership development and consulting and strategy. And it's funny that you bring this manager up, because it reminded me of the book Surrounded by Idiots.
Mm.
And the author actually talks about why he decided to give this name to the book, and it's a book about different personality styles, the DISC personality assessment. But Surrounded by Idiots, the name actually came from this experience that he went into one of those organizations that wanted his help as a consultant. And the owner of the company was just this type of personality, who would just like blame everybody around it. And he would always say, well, all of them are idiots, all of them are idiots. And then this consultant ended up asking him, but who hired those idiots? It didn't go well. He didn't continue working with them. But it was a really good beginning and opening to this, idea that, well, if you think that everyone that you surround yourself with is an idiot, maybe you have a role to play there as well.
Yeah.
And you also brought up another very important point that I think a lot of organizations need to consider, because I was reflecting on my personal and professional life. There are people in my personal life as well as professional life that I would feel much more comfortable to have difficult and open conversations with. And there are others that I don't feel comfortable doing that for different reasons, right? But then if we translate it into the workplace, I think that it's also, we need to take into consideration the culture. And you mentioned the workplace culture of, let's say, trust. Do I actually trust my manager that I can come and say that I made a mistake? Does the management trust me if they say, you make the decisions, that I can make maybe mistakes, or I won't make the right decisions all the time, but do I have the autonomy to fail and they would still have my back, So I think it's also about this organizational culture, isn't it? When you build this culture of trust, this is where difficult conversations can actually happen.
Absolutely, because with trust, in a way that you would think, in that perhaps think about it in this way, with close personal friends, you feel, well, I can have that, or family members, I can have that conversation, and people know it's coming from the right place.
Yeah.
They know it's trusted. We know it can be reciprocal. And they always say that phrase, "It's not personal." And I know that's a bit trite, but there's also a little bit in there that somebody, it's not about somebody trying to score points off of somebody. So I think that there's that. But I think a lot of organisations will talk about, well, we want to build a culture of innovation. We want to build a culture of risk taking.
Big words on the walls.
We want, we want trust. We want people to challenge. No blame culture was always, that's sort of not quite as flavour of the month now. I remember that some years ago, no blame culture was the thing people talked about. I remember working with one company. The guy said to me, "Yeah, we have a no blame culture here until something goes wrong." Yeah, which was so true, because the minute something went wrong, it was like, well, who do we look to blame? And again, it was always that look. Well, who can we go down? So I'm going to sort of metaphorically speaking, kick the dog, and then it's like, well, now I get down to the person here. They haven't got any. They turn around. There's no one else, so it's going to be them. They're the one that's out the door. But in the book that we contributed to, Ken and I, called The Culture Revolution, that was a series of 12, 13 authors who all looked at organizational culture from a different perspective. So some were consultants, some were business owners who built cultures. And the section we put in, unsurprisingly, was about the culture of being able to have difficult conversations. Because as anyone that's listened to any of Jordan Peterson's work will have heard him say, we can't have any conversation about anything that's important, whether it's in a private life, whether it's in the wider society, or whether it's in our organizations, if we're frightened that somebody might be offended or might not like what we're saying. So if I put a business plan proposal on the table, hey, I think this is a great thing to do. If nobody risks to think like, well, he might be a bit upset if we tell him we don't think it's particularly good for these reasons. So we would just go ahead, implement something that ultimately isn't very good, is going to fail, because nobody in the room wanted to say, which they reckon is one of the reasons for the Challenger disaster with the space shuttle. because nobody felt that they could put their hand up and say, I think we've got a bit of a problem here. So you don't say anything, and then and this is common in lots of organisations, that we don't consciously say, okay, we need to consciously say we're going to do this and we're going to role model this, and that means that as the leader, I'm going to be prepared for people to challenge me. And nothing bad's going to happen to them. There's going to be no zombie apocalypse or something, and they're dragged from the room or something the minute they do. And equally, others, because when you can see that happening, and then more people did speak up, and people did have really meaningful conversations about work relationships, or how work is being done, and nothing bad happens to people for doing that. In fact, actually, that's rewarded for people doing that. That then becomes the culture that you have. But the minute you say we've got a no blame culture, and then something happens and we're looking around for who to scapegoat, you can then talk about trust and all the things afterwards. No one's going to believe you. They're just going to go, yeah, well, they say that, but when it comes down to it, they don't book any challenge. So
it's such an important topic, and I think we can talk about it forever, about how do we build a culture of trust, how do we actually make it such that it's not just this big because I think majority of the organizations would have trust, teamwork in their values, right? Either that would be the keywords in the values or the mission or the vision of the company. But how does it actually show inclusivity? What do you mean inclusivity? How do you actually see that people are feeling included? Are they feeling open enough to share the opinions that they have, even if this is something that does not necessarily align with the majority? Do they feel comfortable enough to challenge the decisions of the management or the leadership? If they disagree with something, if you give them autonomy to do something, do you actually give them the autonomy and you don't micromanage them? So this trust, as much as it sounds, simple, everybody knows that it's important, but it's extremely difficult to develop. And as you said, it has to be led by example. It has to be actually be the living and breathing mechanism of the organization. And then when it comes to all of those disagreements, we probably need to be ready for, when we talk about diversity, having this diversity of thoughts, of opinions, and be okay with that, and the moment people feel that they actually have the space to share what they think and to share their opinion, this is where we start building this culture of trust.
Yeah, I think there's probably a couple of things perhaps to lead viewers or listeners with. I mean, one is that idea about diversity. So front on that, often lots of companies talk about diversity, and what they mean is everybody looks and sounds different, but they all think the same. Whereas really you say, well, diversity is about thought diversity, not so much about whether people look differently or sound different, but they think differently, and that means a whole spectrum of thought. Not just these are things that we like people to think differently about, and these are things we don't. If you really want to have diversity of thought, which allows you to bring creativity, you have to allow people to have different opinions, which means those opinions could be ones that people don't like. So we want to create a physical safe space for people. It's physically safe to work, but that mentally and in terms of their conversation and discussion and exploration is challenging. And I don't mean that challenging that people end up with mental health problems, but challenging in that you're going to hear things that you don't agree with, and that's okay, because we can talk that through. Otherwise, we're never going to have any progress. The other thing, if people are looking at saying, well, how do I do this? Because in my organization, I don't run the organization. Most people listening or watching this are not the CEO. And I would take on something that Simon Sinek talked about, which was start small and start with what you can control in your own team. So you can say, this is what I want my team to be like. So I'm going to role model those behaviors in my team.
Or even person sitting beside me, start with your peer.
But somebody, if we just think of as a team leader, this is what I'm going to do with the 4 people that work for me. This is how we're going to operate. Because guess what? When people look around, they go, oh, this is quite good. And other people get to hear about it. And then there's 2 things happen. One, people want to come and work there because they like that type of environment. Or others look and go, well, what are they doing over there that seems to be good? Well, we could do some of that as well. And it sort of becomes a force multiplier. So you don't have to be the CEO of the company to start introducing
I
a culture
absolutely
which
agree.
is more trust based, but is more challenge based, where we
Yeah.
actually we're looking at. We're on the same page in terms of what we're trying to achieve. How we achieve it may be the different views. In which case, well, we need to exchange those views. And if we can't agree where we need to be going, then we have to have that conversation until we do agree where we're going.
That's such an important point, because very often people don't spend enough time to actually looking into, okay, what are we trying to achieve as an organization? And then if the organization is being transparent enough who they are and what they're trying to achieve, and I'm being transparent enough with myself, I also, as an employee, let's say, I can make a choice. Is it something that I'm aligned with and I actually want to go into it? Or, well, okay, cool, that's what you're trying to achieve, but this is not something that aligns with my values and my views, so probably I'm going to find another place.
Yeah.
Because when we talk about inclusivity, the real belonging is where people can be their authentic selves, and everybody talks about it, and everybody talks about importance of it. And I'm sure that most of the organizations have the best intentions. Everybody would have the intention of building a company of trust, building a company of inclusion, of belonging. But the real belonging, it's not something that happens by only having comfortable and easy going conversations and people. The real belonging will only happen when we let those uncomfortable conversations to take place, and we actually equip people with the tools to navigate those uncomfortable conversations.
Exactly, and I think this perhaps maybe is two thoughts on that. One is, if we're as an organisation or as a team, are we purpose driven?
Mm,
We have a purpose. Because once people can buy into a purpose that's bigger than just them,
yeah,
then it's much easier to get people aligned, because it's purpose driven,
yeah,
rather than it's just about well, do we make it, how much money I get paid at the end of the month, or whether I get my own way. It's about, we're trying to achieve this as a purpose. And the second point is thinking around as a team, is that if you think about any relationship, now whether that's a personal relationship, whether it's a family relationship with friends, if you look back seriously, do we agree on everything? Have we never have a disagreement? We never have a crossword. I mean, it's like, if you have couples that say we've been married for 50 years and we've never had an argument, and it's
something's
sort of
wrong.
like, well, okay, what, like, have you never spoken then? Do you not have a level of conversation? I mean, not that you want to be arguing all the time, but
Yeah,
if you never
yeah,
have a difference of opinion that you can air and talk about and reflect on, and then be able to say, I was wrong, or you were right, or yeah, well, let's split
agree
the
to
difference. So
disagree.
yeah, that's normal. That's just normal human behavior. So why an
Yeah.
organization would have to agree all the time, or not to say anything that somebody might not like? Well, what's the worst thing that happens? You don't like it. All right. Well, then you can put a better argument. If you think that I disagree with you, if we're sitting here and I said, well, I disagree with you and I don't like what, well, I'm going to go away and think about a better argument to put to you and go, okay, I need to talk about this again, because here is what I'm going to put in front of you.
Yeah.
If I'm not prepared to do that, I'm just going to go, well, I don't like that. I don't like your idea for the marketing plan, or I don't like what you think about X. Well, I'm just going to go and sulk in the corner and say, well, come on, we're adults. We're not at kindergarten. At kindergarten, you can do that. As adults,
Yeah.
you go, okay, well, if you come up with a better plan, don't like that plan, come up with a better plan.
It's awesome, and that's why the book, and that's why having uncomfortable conversations is the foundation of building this trust in your organization.
100%.